So in this video, we'll look at API testing. This is also called as application programming interface. This is also another advanced testing technique, and it can be come under functional testing, but is more involved with data exchange between two separate software systems. This is more popular for testing the backend part and interface between the main UI, the application screens, and the actual database, right? So there is an interface between UI and the database. So this is basically the programming interface. So we're going to test this programming interface using different data formats. We will send different requests and things like that. This is also a more popular testing technique for testing the data interface between front end and the back end. Back end is database, front end is nothing but the actual UI screens, right? So API defines the requests that can be made and how to make requests and data formats that can be used, etc., between two software systems. This is the API testing, right? So API testing is a software testing type that validates application programming interface, right? The purpose of API testing is to check the functionality, reliability, performance, and security of the programming interfaces. So we test the functionality. We'll also check the reliability. Reliability in the sense, if something fails, is it giving proper error messages? Right? If there is a data error or network error, are we getting proper error messages and things like that? And performance is also important to check the response timings and load timings and security of the programming interfaces, right? So we need to ensure security of the programs as well as part of API testing. So in API testing, so instead of using standard user inputs and outputs, so you use the software to send calls to the API to get output. So here, we're not going to test it from the screens. So we're going to use some tools. So there is some tools for API testing called SOAP UI or Postman, right? So we're going to use those tools to call the API to get output, note down the system response. So this API tests are very different from UI tests and won't concentrate on the look and feel of application. So it mainly concentrates on the business logic layer of software architecture. Right. So this is basically more to test the business rules of the application in the API testing. That is the main goal of API testing. So let's see some diagram. This is how it will be. It looks like, right? So API testing, so GUI testing over here. There's a presentation layer, business layer, and database layer. So any application has three layers. So presentation layer is user interface, business layer is application user interface, and database layer is the database. So what we are doing is API testing. We are testing here in the business layer. So that is the main important. We are mainly testing the business logic in API testing, right? So I think this is duplicate. So these are the differences between API testing and unit testing. What is unit testing? How API testing works, right? Differences, right? So unit testing is developer performs, API testing is tester performs, right? So unit testing, separate functionality is tested, API end-to-end functionality is tested, right? We are testing from the end-to-end point of view, right? Developer can access source code, so tester will not have access to the source code. So in unit testing, some of the UI is involved, but API, only API functions are tested. So unit testing, mostly basic functionality is tested, but API we want to test all functionality. So unit testing is limited in scope, but API is broader in scope. So this is usually ran before check-in. Check-in is a process where developers commit code to the repository where they maintain their code. API testing is run after the build is created, right? Once they complete the build, the API testing is run. So this is more, this functionality is more broad in API testing compared to unit testing, right? So, but this is also involves some, we need to use some tools to test API testing, but we are testing more functionality. So what are the various types of API testing? So one is discovery testing, and then usability testing, security testing, automated testing, and documentation. So documentation is anyway important in any of the testing methods, but in API testing is more important because we want to follow the API documents to test the application logic, right? So let us see one by one what are these testing techniques. Discovery testing. So what is discovery testing? The test group should manually execute a set of calls documented in the API. So there is an API document that will be given to the testers. So they're going to follow this API document. They're going to execute the calls documented in the API. So some of the calls can be a specific resource exposed by APIs can be listed, created, and deleted as an appropriate. Right. Suppose you are doing employee management, so there can be API call for listing all employees or create a new employee, delete an employee. So there is a separate API calls for creating, deleting, editing, or listing an employee. So we want to test all those calls. So that is a discovery testing. So then usability. So usability is what basically we test for functionality and user friendliness, right? If there is a problem, does it giving proper errors, right? Is the function, so when you add an employee, is it adding correctly? So when there is a duplicate employee number, is it giving error correctly? Things like that. That is usability, right? Then security testing. So this testing includes what type of authentication is required and whether sensitive data is encrypted or HTTP or both. This is mostly like, so we're going to use secured protocols and things like that. So this is one of the API testing methods. Then automated testing. So you can automate API testing so that you can run these scripts frequently at regular intervals, right? So some of the tools like SOAP UI and Postman will allow you to automate some of this API testing. Then the documentation, right? So we're going to create documentation. The test team has to make sure that documentation is adequate and provides enough information to interact with the API, right? So when we are testing this API, developers will give us the documentation of what are the calls, what are the various functions that are called in this API. So we need to have the proper documentation, and also we'll include that documentation as part of the final deliverable, right? So these are the various techniques of API testing, right? These are all like little advanced techniques. So what are the things we're going to monitor during API testing? Right, these are some of the things. Fail to handle error conditions gracefully, right? Unused flags, missing or duplicate functionality, reliability issues like a difficulty in connecting or getting a response from API, security issues, multi-threading, performance issues like API response time is very high, improper errors or warnings to a caller, incorrect handling of valid argument values, response data is not structured correctly. So these are some of the formats how the API will send the outputs. So this response data structuring and all. These are various things that will be monitored during the API testing. So these are some of the challenges when we are doing API testing. Because API testing is basically parameter combination, parameter selection, and call sequencing. So if you are doing API testing, you probably should have some background on programming to test the APIs to understand this. So there is no GUI available to test the application, which make it difficult to give input values. So you have to you have to prepare some data manually to test the APIs, because there is no screen available, right? So verifying and validating is on different systems is difficult for testers. Parameters and parameter selection and categorization is required to be known to the testers. So you should understand what parameters to pass to the application interface and what are the expected outputs from the application interface. So testers should be aware of that. Exception handling function to be tested. Coding knowledge is necessary for testers, right? So here we need coding knowledge for API testing and all, right? So that is important. So this is what the API testing is. So this is just basically an introduction of API testing. If we have to go full deeper, this needs some programming knowledge and all. So as long as you are aware of what API testing is good for manual testing purpose, right? So this is what the conclusion, right? API consists of set of classes, functions, and procedures which represent business logic layer. If API is not tested properly, it may cause problems, not only the API application, but also the calling application. So it is an indispensable part test in software engineering. So it's an important part of software engineering to test the APIs for business logic, right? So this is all about API testing. So any questions, please put it in the group so we can discuss your questions or clarifications.